Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Founder Shift podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Noon, and today's episode is a little bit different. This is a replay of a presentation that I did when I was interviewed by our guest, Terry Ramsey. It was part of a summit that Terry runs called the Pay Yourself Summit. This summit focuses on earlier stage entrepreneurs who are just getting out of that stage where you're in survival mode and you're building, and you're actually in a position where you can pay yourself. So every guest on her summit had a different point of view on how to create ROI with all those different activities, how to manage yourself, how to manage your finances. My part was my team LTV, lifetime value model, and how to make great decisions even from your very first hire and how to create lifetime value across your business forever. So I'm really excited for you to dive into it. But first, I want to sing Terry's praises a little bit because she didn't really get a chance to do that during our episode because she was the one interviewing me. Terry likes to say she's an entrepreneur who is crazy enough to quit her teaching career, start a bookkeeping firm, launch a ramen ghost kitchen, and yatai cart, travel to the Middle East while 7 months pregnant, have a baby, and move across the country to Seattle, all within 5 years. Terry says that marketing should be fun and fulfilling. That's why Terry created the Pay Yourself Summit and the Tarot Business Community on School to help create a platform for entrepreneurs to share advice, to learn, and to discover other kick-ass business owners to utilize. Terry has worked with over 25 plus businesses for financial support and strategy. And her own business ventures include Red Rabbit Ramen, Tarot Business Solutions, Bookkeeping Matchup, and of course, the Pay Yourself Summit. Terry is inviting you to her Tarot Business Community on School. It's a great place to get business mini courses, connection, and I'll be presenting within this community at some point as well, so you will see me in there. I'm going to add the link to the show notes, so be sure to check it out, and let's dive in.
Welcome to Pay Yourself Summit. I'm your host, Terry Ramsey, and today we are joined by Jessica Noon of Daybreak Ideas. Jessica specializes in helping founders build high-performing teams that scale their businesses without sacrificing clarity, freedom, or momentum. Today's topic is all about taking the leap in your business with your first hire. Jessica, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and start with getting acquainted. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how it's led to what you do today?
Absolutely. So I'll try to make a long story short, but I've spent the last almost 18 years now, mostly in founder-led businesses, being the right-hand people strategist. So my specialty is actually building functions and making them work long-term inside founder-led businesses. I've also worked in a well-known Fortune 500 brand. I've worked across the UN system and in other mission-driven spaces. And so I've really seen all aspects of scale from very beginning to high growth, M&A. I've seen, the impact, and it's been really interesting to see that journey because even when I'm called in to do a culture transformation, right, to fix how the team is interacting and performing, even then, usually the solution comes down to a couple of simple but elegant practices that you can implement and that scale with you. So I decided to make an accelerator around that. They might be just at the precipice of growth stage, or they might be in it. They might be really building functions and scaling their teams for the first time. And so I support that on several different levels, from the architecture. What does that actually look like? Who needs to be in your team? And how will that evolve over the next 1 to 5 years? The leadership capacities, because once you get specialists, it's a totally different ballgame from when you managed, assistants and interns. And then, of course, the mind transformations that are just inherent in, like, now I have 20% of my time back. What on earth am I going to do? Am I going to check people's work, or am I going to reinvent my own role? And what does it feel like to actually let go? It's harder than a lot of founders think. So it's really fun. It's a really immersive accelerator, and I'm excited for it.
Beautiful. So we have a lot of our audience that has business ventures, and many of them are either solopreneurs kind of doing the whole damn thing themselves right now. They may have hired some VAs to help with kind of the busy work and take over with that. And they might have hired or worked with other agencies like a social media manager or a bookkeeper or other services, but they might not have hired from within yet. So, why do you think hiring from within can be such an amazing next steps for businesses as they grow instead of doing what they're doing now?
That's a great question. Part of the reason why I built the program that I did is usually it takes a little trial and error
Mhm.
until you find what good looks like. So usually it's a contractor that you find this capability that they have and you're like, this will make the difference for my business. And I'm just trying to make that light bulb happen earlier because it can be designed if you really understand the architecture. That first hire, especially if you've been a solopreneur, you've created every outcome yourself. You've built this business with your heart. And so it can be really tough to know what is the right first hire. Some people start with getting rid of things that they don't like, which is valid. Some people, want to give away this ancillary business support stuff like marketing. That's really common. That'll be my first hire. But many don't realize that they actually have to construct the process first,
Mm.
test it, make sure they understand the needle movers, make sure they really have a vision for where they want to go with this and what they want to produce with these roles. That'll create a lot of success.
So, how does a business owner first determine what role they should create for their first hire?
Yeah, I actually have a map for this, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm going to give you this calculator that I made for this, where I often work with entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who have that exact question. And one way to solve it is to, I mean, you can even do this, everybody in the audience who's listening right now. Write down the top 5 things that you think of when you think of that question and then score them 1 to 5. How do I feel about this? Does it make me,
How do
want
I
to jump up?
personally feel about this, doing that role, or is
Yeah.
that
How do
okay?
you personally feel when you're doing this task?
Okay.
Because especially for a solopreneur, like you're doing everything. Usually the clients who do this process are solopreneurs who are doing everything themselves. And there's a couple things that happen. Sometimes you just feel like, oh my gosh, it would be so much faster if I just did this myself.
Guilty of that, yes.
Sometimes it is, but why, right? Is it because this is really part of your founder magic zone and only you can do it? Everybody thinks only I can do everything at
Mhm.
first. But when you really write these down and you score them, like one is when I do this, it saps my energy. I'm exhausted. I can't do anything else for the rest of the day. I'm being a little dramatic, but pretty much. Two is like, I can do this. I'm probably doing it because I'm fast at it, not necessarily because it's important for me personally to do it. Three is like, I would really like to give this away because I know it's not in my zone of genius.
Mhm.
And maybe there's a little process that needs to be done. Four is like, I am lit up by doing this, So am I good at this because I've done it so many times, or am I good at it because this is a really high value needle mover and I need to be the face of it?
Hmm.
So adding that level of, analysis to it. How do I feel when I'm doing this? Is this really something I want to keep forever? And really challenging yourself on that. Is it really faster forever if I keep doing this always? What am I missing out on if I don't give this away? And then that makes the decision really clear.
Yeah, and I love the idea of, yeah, there's like the stuff that like you hate. Those are obviously the first things that you want to get rid of. But I like the idea of like thinking about, especially the things that you would score a 3. What are the things that I'm just not an expert in? That is such a good one to think about whenever it comes to hiring out. Like you might be able to do it, it might be fast, but like, are you actually that good? Is
Yeah.
it doing your business good for you to do it? I think that that's really funny to think about what you are going to fire yourself first in with doing your business. So
Put
let's
it.
talk about hiring though, because hiring can be expensive. Sure, I mean like there's part-time work, there's, that cuts down some of the costs, but overall you're hiring somebody and their whole life into your business and you are you need to care for them financially. So
Yeah.
there's some expense that comes along with that. So how can a business owner think about this higher cost in a positive way for their business?
Yeah. I mean, like anything, it's always an investment. And you can hire in a way that gets some tasks off your plate and gets you a couple hours back. And that's one type of investment. Think of it as like your typical, I don't know, standard bank savings account, right?
Mhm.
Versus a high yield, which would be somebody that you have carefully scoped, you understand the outcomes, you're able to hand over a process, and you've evaluated someone who is not just skilled, but also a good fit for the future and the culture of your business. This can be evaluated by more than just, oh, I like this person, right? There
Mhm.
are very clear markers for the culture that you're trying to develop. And will this person add on to what I have built, both task wise and culture wise, or is this a person who can maintain what I've built?
Mm.
So there's an important distinction there. Do they have the expertise and the experience to actually build on top of what you have? If scaling and growth is your goal, that's the biggest question to ask. And it can be evaluated, but most people don't have the experience to do that, which is why they usually bring in someone who does have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of like, how much are you going to actually, well, one, your own time is a way of making more money in your business because then you can go out and focus on the growth and sales and everything else. I think the other thing too is if you think about the example of like hiring somebody in your business to do sales, then that's bringing in more money for your business.
Right.
So it's just kind of it's about the role that you bring them into from whether you are the one that's going to be making more money than from your free time or if they're going to help the business make more money. Am I kind of getting that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I like that you brought up sales too, because this
Mhm.
is often one that is so interesting for me, especially because I've been a client in some of these sales processes too. And so I've been reflecting when you think you need someone for sales,
Mhm.
exactly what stage? Is it lead gen? Is it nurture? Or is it the closers?
Mm.
Because I think unless you have a very well established name, like the big dudes who are like already millionaires and they have closers, like I'm not sure how effective that is for people who are a little bit earlier stage, who
Mm.
are just now starting to get to that level, who need to do the process that possibly themselves, but maybe not the whole process. That's the other thing too. When I talk about what's your process, sounds so dry, right? But it's real. And it's about what point in this process do I need a person? Maybe it's somebody to go from lead gen to, highly qualified, and then you do the closing call. If you're one-to-one coach or consultant and you are the person ultimately delivering the service, sales is like a relationship building
Sure.
and you may need to be still involved. So again, like with the marketing process, maybe you're the face of it, but you can have somebody on your team who can do the strategy, who knows social, who can write you a list of prompts, and then you just turn your camera on and then they cut up the videos and post them. So you'll probably need to be involved, but are you involved in checking and correcting, or are you involved at a very strategic point that adds value? So it's a similar thought process, but there's nuance.
Okay, cool. So for those like new businesses, obviously like you said yourself of like I cannot wait to fire myself and my own marketing. Is there any other types of positions like that for like typical hires, like these first hires besides just marketing that you
Yeah.
gravitate to that you really love for businesses to consider?
Well, ops is a really interesting one too, because many of us are the visionaries and they may be looking for someone who is more process minded. It's a really interesting experience leadership wise when you do get that person. One of the things that you have to be so solid in is what is this process? What does it do? Not what does it have, right? I say that a lot in terms of like ways of working and process building and things like that. What do you need this process to accomplish? What is the end? What is better than what you have ever done in the end? What's your wish list for what outcomes this needs to have, and how measurable is that? Because when you bring on someone close or even at your level, that becomes even more important because they can probably do the how that you may not be super sure of, but you have to be clear on the end.
Hmm.
And we don't often think about that. We just want to say, I have this idea. Can you make it happen? But I even have in my accelerator a good idea filter system because every idea, this is a good way to fatigue a team. Every time you see something new, shiny object syndrome, we're like, oh, we need to be doing this because this is working for this other, person. So that person, you have to allow them to challenge you on some of this stuff. So much of it is internal. So much of it is really being so clear on the end of the process, more so than the steps A, B, and C to get there.
Gotcha. So if you're going from being this solopreneur, either having a VA or hiring outside services, you might get rocked whenever it comes to this huge shift in your business. As you were saying, you have to relinquish some control and you need to hear that feedback. So it's very different than how we've been doing that work in the past. So we need to kind of give up some of our control whenever it comes to having a new hire. So can you give us some insight on this big transition and what we as the business owner can do for ourselves during this shift?
That is such a good question. And I love that you're thinking about that. When you're thinking about bringing on someone into your business, it often feels like, oh, thank God, I can let this go. But often, even if it's someone like a VA managing your inbox, I've heard founders come to me and say, well, I had to redo that email because they just don't understand my thought process. And that might be true, but there's a bit of analysis that needs to come when you're really self-aware and you're committed to really being your best for this next stage, which is so important. It's going to present challenges because look, I get it. This is your baby. This is a normal response when you bring someone in and it's not exactly like you would do it. That's why it's so important to get people who might be able to either do it how you would do it or to offer you things that you didn't think of. That's usually my best indicator. If I'm in an interview and someone asks someone, how would you approach this problem? Or how do you think about this challenge? And they give me something that I didn't even think of. That's the right hire. That's a really good indicator. Having that presence though takes practice. Having that presence of mind to be like, get beyond, I like this person, get beyond their resume is good, and really give them behavioral interview questions. It takes practice. It does. One of the other mindset things that often comes up in is ownership. Like, how involved do I really need to be? When I talk to leaders about delegation, I look at it as what degree of autonomy are you delegating? How involved do you really, and again, let's challenge ourselves on this,
Mhm.
how involved do you really need to be in this process? Do you need to check everything? Or could it be, you know, here's the outcome, here's the challenge, here's the problem to solve. How would you go about this? Give me a suggestion and then I'll say yes or no before you implement. Or it could be, hey, try this, let me know the outcome, and then we'll work together on finishing it. There's different points in a process where it's important for you to get involved, especially at the beginning. Also, none of this is static. That would be the third thing I would say. None of this is static. And even an expert, even like if you brought on a chief operations officer, they're not going to know the intricacies and the nuances of your business on day one. They may know their specialty, but you still need to train them in what works and why it works inside your business. So these are things that you need to have, locked in.
So at what point, money-wise, does a business owner actually know that it's a good time to hire?
Yeah, this is a hard one because it is so personal. It is so personal in terms of what you really need. What's your number that you can comfortably live on where you don't have to question, am I going to pay rent this month or my mortgage or what have you? It depends on if there's more support in your household. Maybe you're comfortable with bringing on someone earlier because you know it's going to be a real needle mover. There's no number. But what I will say is you need your marketing and sales process very dialed.
Mm.
You need to be able to depend on where your clients are coming from. You need to know how to produce revenue if you need it. And if you haven't nailed that, then I would go first to someone who can help you with marketing and sales.
go to trainings, like really nail how you get clients. And once you've nailed that, when you're at a number where you're above what you really need, then that might be a good time. One question too that we were talking about earlier was what kind of person should it be? Does it need to be a full-timer? Everyone assumes that when they hire me, it's because they need to bring on a full-timer, but that's not necessarily the case. Some people have seasonal businesses where it makes the most sense to have contractors. Now, this is something, of course, you need to be careful with because you need to do it legally. So if it's a permanent person who's really integrated, acting on behalf of your business, then it gets a little messy. But if there's a clear start and end date to a project, if there's a very specific scope that's not going to change, then contractors might make sense. You can dial up and dial down your use of these contractors. They're free to go work elsewhere. It doesn't need to be a situation where you're the only one that they're serving. It might even be contract to hire. Maybe you have a project specifically with very clear boundaries that you want to work on to make sure that it's really the right person and the right skill set for your business. And then, once the contract is over, you can reassess. And you can also do part-time. You can do, if you do find that person that you want to really integrate into your business for the long term, it's like, yes, this can add on to what I have, then it might be worth, even if you're not ready for a full-timer, it might be worth bringing them on as a true hire and just part-time. And one interesting, and I'll send more information about this, but there are things called PEOs, professional employer organizations, who take on kind of the risk. They have basic HR type support on the back end. You can get access to health insurance. So there's a lot of different ways to do that other than, okay, now I have to manage all the tax implications and all the things myself. I would say, anyway, headline, have your revenue stream nailed. Once you do, then it's a matter of what number you're comfortable with. And when you do it, don't lock yourself into full-time right away. You may not need it. Part-time is fine. Contractor in very specific situations is fine. And you can even have someone do an audit of what you're doing right now on a very temporary basis, somebody who is really high level who can advise you on that as well.
Great. I love the idea of like actually having them do an audit of you. I'm gonna give you some ideas. It could be a really good way of kind of scoping them out too. So
Yeah.
this has been really eye-opening. I have a lot of like ideas and questions about my own business going on in my head, but I would love to go ahead and say like if there's one thing that you would love all these entrepreneurs to know, whether you've already said it, you want to reiterate it again, or we kind of missed over it. What is like that one thing that you're just like, I wish entrepreneurs would just know this?
I would say think in terms of your optimal future,
Mm,
what you want your business to look like, and then from there, go a little bit backwards and say, what capabilities am I really missing? Being really honest with yourself. What capabilities do I need to add? And honestly, give people some time to ramp up. Have a really clear interview process where you are evaluating these people on very concrete metrics. Concrete doesn't just mean, hey, you have to have this exact industry, you have to have done this 3 times before. Like, it's not about that. It's really about defining those capabilities and the outcomes that need to happen. That comes before deciding what hire you need.
beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I understand that, you've got a gift that you're giving away. Also, can you talk a little bit more about how people can follow you, be in your world, or potentially work with you in the future?
Yes, absolutely. So they can go to daybreakideas.com. They can follow me on Instagram, daybreak_Jess. So daybreak as in morning because my last name is Noon. Get it?
Mm,
Daybreak Noon.
awesome. And what about your free gift
I
for
actually
the
have,
listening?
yes, I have two. One that will help you make some core decisions about what higher type classification you may need. And then I'm also giving away my magic delegation calculator,
Hmm.
which has some secret surprises baked in. Anyone needs any additional debriefs or you want to talk it through, I'm always available as well. I'll add my Calendly onto the page.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing this with us. I think that's it's really sparked a lot in me about like, what is the next phase of my growth as a business owner. And I think that you've given such really great insights into how to see this next process and actually make it work for you, because it is a process. It is going to be
Yeah.
a journey, and you might not get it right off the bat, but at least now I feel like I've got a little bit more tools in my belt to help me out in the future if I need to take this on. So really appreciate you being here and sharing with our audience today.
Fantastic. Yeah, the world is always changing. It's always about evolution, and designing that up front can be really impactful. So thank you for having me on. It was really a fun conversation.